Khurram Saab, Umar Saab, welcome. So let's
Thank
start.
you.
Thank you for joining us and sparing time this evening. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to all our viewers. Today, alongside my colleague Michael Kugelman, we dive into a critical conversation about Pakistan's journey through transformative but challenging period. The country has recently seen a new government take office and the inauguration of the national and provincial legislatures. Yet the path to stability and prosperity seems as complex and elusive as ever. The backdrop of Pakistan's current scenario is a tapestry of long-standing challenges, governance issues, absence of rule of law, frequent political disruptions, a lack of visionary leadership, and the trials of navigating a difficult geopolitical neighborhood. These issues were further compounded in April 2022 with the ousting of former Prime Minister Imran Khan on the pretext of saving the state. This plunged the country deeper into turmoil. Now standing at a pivotal juncture, Pakistan grapples with profound social and political rifts. The country's institutional framework is shaking. Financial reserves are dwindling. The economy is undergoing severe strain, and terrorism is resurgent. There's a palpable sense that the foundational contract between the citizens and the government has been compromised, leading to diminished administrative efficiency and a judiciary struggling to assert its authority. Despite this somber picture, the indomitable spirit of optimism that characterizes the Pakistani people remained undimmed. There was a collective hope that the electoral process would chart a course towards stability, offering a beacon of light out of the shadows of multiple crises. However, the reality of the elections introduced a new set of controversies that seemed to further silence the people's voices through delays, first in holding of elections, then in tabulation, manipulations of the outcome, and lack of inclusivity, casting a long shadow over the democratic process. Yet in the face of adversity, the will of the people found a way to assert itself, challenging the ambitions of those who sought to dictate the country's destiny. This resilience, however, seems to have been met with continued challenges as we step into the unfolding of this new governmental era. This juncture presents a critical opportunity for reflection and action. The youth, who are the majority and the future of Pakistan, have witnessed a year that scarcely inspires hope for a society that is fair, progressive, and inclusive. They demand more than status quo. They are seeking a substantial change. What they have been given are restrictions on their freedom of expression, especially in digital arenas. To navigate these complex waters, we have convened a panel of distinguished guests from across the political spectrum. We have with us this evening Mr. Umar Ayub Khan, who is the Secretary General of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Mr. Khurram Dastagir Khan, Vice President Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, and Dr. Nafisa Shah, a senior leader from Pakistan People's Party. Our conversation today aims to explore their visions and strategies and the perspectives of their parties for moving Pakistan forward, away from the precipice of crisis and towards a future filled with hope and unity. Thank you all for joining us today in this conversation. The format of today's conversation is that there will be 4 rounds of questions, 2 of which will be conducted by me and 2 by my colleague, Michael. So let's start with the question session. I'll first go to Mr. Khurram Dastagir Khan. Mr. Khurram, is Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz leadership considering a strategy to reconcile with the opposition and end the victimization of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and its leaders, even if it entails making challenging initial moves? Under the current situation, do you think PMLN would be in a position to redress the civil-military imbalance? Mr. Khurram?
Well, the first question is simpler, Bakir Saab, because we are ready to offer reconciliation to all parties, all opposition parties. But that reconciliation has to be grounded in democratic norms. And the first of those norms is that the opposition, if it feels that the votes it obtained in the February 8 elections gave it a certain mandate, it also has to respect the 70% votes that were given to other parties. They have 30%, great. But 70% of Pakistan voted for other parties. So if that 30% is valid, then the other 70% have to be respected and recognized as valid also. Because what we have seen from this particular opposition is this constant refrain that except them, everyone else is either an infidel, is otherwise a thief, or is a traitor. So if this constant refrain goes on, and if you heard the speeches that we saw on the day of the election of the Speaker of the National Assembly, and these straightforward threats of physical violence, that we will break the legs or we will break the arms, they don't bode well. So the issue is, if the opposition is willing to come back from the threats that they have made, including the threat that they will not allow the government to legislate, the government is willing to shake hands with them. Although when they were in power, their prime minister constantly and pointedly refused to shake hands with the opposition, who multiple times did offer a hand that we want to cooperate and move forward, while of course remaining in opposition. So every day in the new National Assembly, it will be opportunity for the opposition to come out from their reactionary and what one would say a vindictive point of view and try to serve the people who voted for them, number one. Number two, the civil-military imbalance
is an issue. Go to civil-military imbalance. Just a follow-up question. Isn't it the government's responsibility to make the first move? You took away their seats. You sought their seats for the reserved seats for the women. You could have left them open. Let them fight their legal battle. But you went to go and seek those seats. So, did that convey a positive gesture for reconciliation?
The thing is that their legal position regarding those seats is extremely weak.
No, but I'm talking about giving a gesture. You know that those seats didn't belong to you.
The thing is,
so why did you go?
The only gesture that could have been given was that these seats were to remain empty until the Supreme Court of Pakistan makes a determination, or the Parliament itself amends the law and decides that if a situation like this arises, what to do about it. So yes, but the gesture again remains that we are willing to work with them. We want to discuss issues. We want to discuss policies. And if they are willing to take half a step forward, we will take 2 steps forward.
And also the civil-military, now your country is obliged to the military leadership. Would it try to, again rebalance that equation?
Your two questions are interestingly connected in this sense that in order to redress the civil-military imbalance, the government and the opposition have to stand together and try to recover the ground that Parliament has lost in Pakistan. It's something that is an issue larger than individual parties. It's an issue larger than whoever is in power at any given moment. So it's again something that if we are able to, and I hope and expect that we will be able to move beyond this current sort of chaos in the National Assembly. This is one subject on which the government and the opposition have to get together and send a signal, not only to the people, but to tell the world and other institutions that this is a parliament that's willing to assert itself, as a representative of the people of Pakistan, and to finally fulfill the promise that the sovereignty in Pakistan, after Allah Almighty, shall reside in the chosen representatives of the people.
Now let me turn to Dr. Nafisa Shah. Actually, their party's chairman, Bilal Bhutto Zardari, a couple of days back outlined a three-pronged strategy that included a charter of reconciliation, a charter of economy, and a judicial commission to investigate May 9 incident. While these proposals sounded promising, Dr. Shah, could you elaborate on how your party plans to engage with both PMLN and PTI to implement these initiatives? Additionally, considering PTI's diminished trust in the judiciary following a series of unfavorable decisions, how viable is the proposal for judicial commission? Dr. Shah.
Thank you very much. First of all, Islamabad Policy Institute and Woodrow Wilson Institute for having me here for this important dialogue looking at Pakistan as we move forward post 2024 elections, and that it seems to be rather stormy for now. But first of all, let me take you to our campaign, the buzzwords in our campaign. And the campaign buzzword was that let us choose a new way of doing politics. And that was specifically designed in the context of, as I said, the turbulent Pakistani politics that it has become, particularly in the context of the, very the confrontational mode in which the two major parties based in Punjab, I would say, have taken. They have taken these strong positions, and then and our position is that we have to really lower the temperatures and create an atmosphere in the country where we can move forward and perhaps come up with a minimum common agenda. I know that now, if you look at the parliament, strong positions are being taken on both sides across the aisle, the treasury benches vis-a-vis the opposition. And People's Party does want to play its role in thawing these relations or moving the country forward. And the contours of those, as you mentioned, were stated in the maiden speech by our party chairman, which was unfortunately marred again by a noisy reaction, which was quite unnecessary by the PTI a couple of days ago. And as you said, that the 3 points were the Charter of Reconciliation. And the last point is related to the Charter of Reconciliation. The PTI has proposed a way forward to look at the May 9th incident bringing together a form of a judicial commission. And we have, said that this, could be one way of going forward, because if we are to bring political stability, then the temperatures would perhaps only come down if there is the feeling of political victimization, particularly among the opposition. Although I would say that the structure of this political victimization began in the PTI time. If you look at our government, 2008 to 2013, there were no political prisoners at that time, and we had said goodbye to political confrontation as well. But unfortunately, the hybrid government that came along with the PTI in 2018 began all this anew. So one way would be to listen to the PTI on this, and to begin, the point of dialogue could be to begin with this, the idea of a judicial commission as a way forward, where both the opposition and the government could agree. And of course, the second issue, which is perhaps a priority for the government and for any government, would be to see how we can come together on issues of economy, which of course would also.
Dr. Shah will be coming back to economy again in my second round of and I asked you about PTI's diminished trust in judiciary, and today I think the verdict from the Supreme Court tells you how important is the role of the judiciary in Pakistan. Your party got justice after 44 years. And do you think that that relationship needs to be restored?
Yes, I think today the development today was very important. The judiciary recognized that they had made mistakes and that there was no fair trial for Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. As personally, I would have liked them to go a step forward and then quash the previous judgment, but perhaps according to the judiciary, procedurally that was not possible. But we can talk about that at another time. On the role of the institutions, I think
I'm talking about how, I'm talking about future. How can we ensure that same miscarriage of justice is not going to happen in future? There are several cases against the opposition right now. And, now that the judiciary is accepting that their predecessors made a mistake, can we work together to ensure that, this miscarriage doesn't happen again?
I will go back to the hybrid form of government. Which began there has always been some form of hybrid power sharing with respect to the establishment in Pakistan, but I think it went into a new level in the PTI time. And unfortunately, institutions were dragged into it. Institutions were made controversial, whether it was the judiciary, whether it is whatever we call the hodgepodge, the establishment, which of course comprises the army, the bureaucracy, and so on. They were dragged into, and in the parliament, let me tell you, I was there in the parliament at that time. I'm there now, but we never saw the establishment's presence inside the parliament during lawmaking process the way it was during the PTI time. And unfortunately, I will have to admit that institutional role, the fuzzy boundaries that they have become, the institutions overstepping their role, has not discontinued. It's still there. And for that, we all politicians really have to, what our chairman talked about, really build some kind of a common code where we protect at least our territorial turf with respect to democracy, with respect to the parliament, with respect to whatever it is, the judiciary or someone else not encroaching our space. And for that, the PTI also has to play its role. We have to start all over again. What we felt, the civilian space that had been claimed or reclaimed post 2007, post the military rule of General Musharraf, is sort of retreated. And in order to reclaim that civilian space, it is not just the responsibility of the government, treasury benches or People's Party alone. It is equally the responsibility of the party that seemingly is saying or arguing that it's on the receiving side of, whatever is happening in the country. So it is something that all the civilian forces, including the civil society, we really have to start all over again. I'm afraid it's going to be a painstaking process, but there has to be some common vision where all of us agree and we don't think of each other as polluted. Unfortunately, that pollution ideology that is created by the PTI, which would prefer to talk with the agencies, with the military, rather than political forces, that was their vision before. If that continues, then this will continue to happen. The civilian space will be encroached, unfortunately, and the only way out is greater role for politicians, greater role for political dialogue, and sort of building trust. Sorry, that got a bit long.
Now let's turn to Mr. Umar Ayub Khan. Mr. Umar, what are the essential conditions for PTI to enter the idea of reconciliation with other political entities? PTI has recently indicated a willingness to engage.
Thank you very much
others, initially through discussions with Maulana Fazlur Rahman and subsequently by backing Mahmood Khan Achakzai as a presidential candidate. Is PTI prepared to extend similar gestures of openness towards additional political stakeholders, especially People's Party and PMLN?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this conference or seminar, I should say, and to the Wilson Institute as well as the Islamabad Policy Institute. Let me start off by saying that, number one, As we speak, I'm sitting in my lawyer's office. I had to get interim bail in an attempted murder case from the Islamabad Terrorism Court this morning. I face approximately 86 charges in 24 different FIRs across the country, all filed against me by the fascist government of PMLN and the caretaker government. So the panelist over here, Mr. Khurram Dasgir, mentioned about extending an olive branch. Every one of our member of parliament has got cases put against them by the PMLN government and the caretaker government, which was an extension of their government. So the fascist tendencies are there for the whole world to see, number one. Number two, we were, and our party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, have been brutalized physically. I myself sustained multiple injuries. Many of our people, the police has been going into our houses without search warrants, completely ransacking the house without any warrants, demeaning the people or the occupants of the house, abusing them, you name it. They have been putting tremendous pressure on the women folk, arresting our party women, putting them in jail. Even today, our women workers are in jail, our men are in jail. So these are the credentials, so to speak, quote unquote, the democratic credentials of the fascist government, that they try to portray themselves as Democrats, but that's not the case. You can't sugarcoat fascism however much you want to sugarcoat it. That's point number one. Point number two is that for any meaningful dialogue to take place, they will have to release our Prime Minister Imran Khan. He has been charged and in fictitious cases of the Toshakhana cipher and the Iddat case, which are baseless cases. Their former Prime Minister, Mian Nawaz Sharif, or former President, Mr. Asif Zardari, if what is good for the goose is then good for the gander. They took vehicles which they were not entitled to from the Toshakhana, and then equally they should be in prison as we speak, if that is the status or the benchmark that is being applied. Number one. Similarly, the cipher case, if anyone has to be charged, then where was the bureaucracy, or where were the officers, the military secretary to the Prime Minister and the principal secretary who had the possession of the documents? They should be the ones facing the charges. Number one, if that is the way they want to go to follow. Number two is for the charges or the government that they have formed today. This is a minority government. They know it for a fact. The Form 47s were tampered with. We have got the proof, and we will be publishing the white paper. The Election Commission of Pakistan has on 2 occasions loaded the Form 45s, which they are mandated to by law, taken them down because you can clearly see the tampering on some of the forms, because we are in possession of the original Form 45s signed, authenticated by the returning officers and by the presiding officers. So therefore, we will be publishing those, and we have today in Parliament, we have 93 seats, and our total seats for which we have a record of is 180 seats. And if you include the reserve seats, our tally goes up to 245 seats. Number two, the Peshawar High Court has stayed the women reserve seats that you were referring to. It's elected. Couple of their members were elected, and they in fact they chose as independents. They were elected as independents. They chose to join the BAP, and they were subsequently awarded the reserve seats. So to say that the case is not strong, I don't think so. That is not correct. That is a fallacy. Our case is very strong, and we should get relief from the courts as well. And you're absolutely right that these parties rush to take their seats, and it is an unholy alliance, number one. They have no mandate. The mandate has been stolen from the people of Pakistan. The PML I'm sorry, I may have been muted because of a telephone call, but PMLN lost the seats and PTI emerged as victorious. So to basically sum up my argument, the government that is being formed today does not have any public support as such. It is a minority government. The People's Party is not taking cabinet positions either. They want to just sit in Sindh and sit on the side in the National Assembly. They are not taking government position, which has been stated by their co-chairman, Mr. Bilawal Bhutto, as well. And the reason is that they don't want to attract all the flack which is going to come on this government because they don't have the wherewithal to go down and institute the policy level or the deep-rooted reforms that are the requirement of the day. Only a strong government with popular support can do so. Thank you very much.
Ms. Omar, I have an additional question for you, and I deliberately kept it separate. I asked the panelists about civil-military imbalance, but I kept it, as a follow-up question for you. The civil-military dynamic is currently facing unprecedented challenges, especially given that PTI leads Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government, it is the opposition at the federal level. And at the same time, PTI lacks a functional relationship with the military leadership amidst escalating conflict with TTP in the region. With the security situation worsening, how does PTI-led government in KPK intend to manage the complexities of civil-military relations while also aiming to stabilize the security environment?
The civil-military relationships will be managed because Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is a reality. The government has been formed, the cabinet has been sworn in KP, and they will be administering the province as is their mandate and given by the people of KP to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. At the federal level, we will have a very robust, a very dynamic opposition, and we will hold the government, the so-called government, because I say it again, so-called because they actually don't have the mandate. It is a minority government. It is being forced down the throats of the people of Pakistan. Regarding the civil-military relationship, it will improve in due course, and because the country has to function and people have to talk for things to function. As far as PMLN is concerned, we doubt their intention, we doubt their integrity. They are the ones who stole our mandate. Thank you.
Michael, over to you for your round of questions regarding foreign policy.
Well, thanks, Bakir, and thanks to the Islamabad Policy Institute. It's really an honor to be here co-moderating with you, Bakir, and also co-hosting this discussion with this very impressive multi-party political panel. So yes, let's zoom out and focus on foreign policy. And I'll go back to you, Sir Khurram Dastgir Khan. In his first speech as premier on Monday, Prime Minister Sharif said that he wants to improve ties with leading countries. So what do you think the new government's foreign policy should look like toward key partners like China, Saudi Arabia, as well as the US and other Western countries?
Mr. Khurram?
I think you're muted, sir.
Pakistan's foreign policy is hostage to its current very difficult economic situation. So we see it through that lens. Although, of course, there's a long-standing notion of Pakistan as a trading crossroads of the region, Pakistan as an energy crossroads. But all our relationships tend to boil down to how much foreign exchange we do have and where to get it next. So the Prime Minister, I believe, will be focusing his efforts first of all, on improving its relations with countries from whom we can attract large-scale investments. And then I can only give my suggestion is to speak to the Western countries and, of course, the United States to say that, however imperfect, Pakistan is a democracy in a region conspicuously lacking democracy, apart from India on the east. So there are certain democratic values that could form the foundation of our future relationships with the United States and the Western countries. There's always this question of that Pakistan's foreign policy has been a series of transactional relationships, that once the transaction concludes, the relationship also degrades, which is probably one of the phases, one of the troughs that we are going through now. But the challenge for Shehbaz Sharif as Prime Minister is to essentially find a whole new basis for our foreign policy, because in 76 years, it's been hostage to our security crisis, the two wars in Afghanistan, particularly in the last 4 decades, and of course, the current economic situation in which somehow foreign policy gets totally intertwined with how we are dealing with the IMF and what kind of concessions we can get from the Paris Club. So a new foundation for Pakistan's future foreign policy has to be laid based upon values, based upon Pakistan's trading potential, and of course, Pakistan as a manufacturing hub for the whole region. But these are all things for the future to consider. Right now, the whole focus is essentially foreign policy as a tool to stabilize Pakistan's economy.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up. We've been hearing for several years this idea of Pakistan pivoting to focus its foreign policy more on geoeconomics, less geopolitics. And if I'm understanding you correctly, are you suggesting that that is a desirable end goal, but it's simply not an immediate term priority, given the need to focus on linking foreign policy to economic needs? Is that what you essentially were saying?
Indeed. And just as the conversation from my good friend from the opposition, peacemaking requires courage. It requires more courage than opposing the other side with strong language. So, for Pakistan to really increase its potential and also to improve its economic situation, Pakistan needs to open up to all countries, and particularly its neighbors. So when we want to, and of course, neighbors are a difficult bunch, beginning with Iran and then Afghanistan, then China on the north and India on the east. So these are all difficult neighbors, which all with their own difficulties. But we need a sort of a more open door policy and to speak to our other partners also that, for example, if we want to trade with Iran and open up our economic relationship, then that does not mean that this is a zero-sum relationship with other countries. It's just that we are in a neighborhood where we need to trade with our neighbors to improve our immediate economic situation and to create long-term trading relationships. It is something that I personally worked on a decade ago regarding India, but then the new Indian government in 2014 torpedoed the whole enterprise. And here we are 10 years later with the trade between Pakistan and India still at standstill. But trading with China, particularly the land route with China that we have, and again, to open up Afghanistan, I do want to mention that Afghanistan, the internal situation in Afghanistan is holding up two very important energy trading projects, which one is the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, and the CASA 1000 project to bring electricity from Tajikistan to Pakistan in the summer and then return it in the winter when we have excess. And these are all projects that are currently funded, but we are unable to construct them because of Afghanistan's own situation. And again, to have Afghanistan as a direct route towards Central Asia, a land route to Central Asia, and to essentially connect Pakistan's ports to Central Asian countries. These are all subjects and projects that could radically improve Pakistan's economic situation in the medium to long term, 5 to 10 years, 15 years. But it's something that we need to work on very seriously and to really set aside our current prejudices and make a serious effort, a courageous effort to open up to all our neighbors.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Really interesting. Some good food for thought. Let's move now to Dr. Nafiza Shah. In the previous ruling coalition, your party held the key cabinet portfolios of foreign affairs and climate change, and of course coincided with the very tragic Pakistan floods of 2022, which of course impacted Sindh disproportionately, as I understand it. We don't yet know what the next cabinet will look like. We don't yet know what the key roles will be. But my question to you is, how do you think this new government should work with its friends and partners abroad on issues of and related to climate change, which is clearly an increasingly serious challenge for Pakistan?
Well, certainly not through populism. We've learned the hard way that populism and foreign policy, they don't really go together. So our foreign policy has to be very measured, realistic, pragmatic. And I understand that Pakistan's economic constraints, perhaps, you know, but it should not be a reason for making our foreign policy restrictive, for choosing any sides, for sort of following this or that power. So Pakistan has to look at its own needs, its own interests. First of all, of course, our neighbors. I think the stability, because of our long border with Afghanistan, with Iran, and then, of course, with India, Pakistan's internal stability often hinges on how we relate to our neighbors, and that has to be, of course, one of our priorities. So we restore stability along our borders, and of course, geoeconomics or geopolitics also they sort of overlap. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. Vis-a-vis the US and China, again, I feel that Pakistan, you know, we need to emphasize on the bilaterals. I think that is where the details will come in. You know, the relation with the bilateral relation with US, which was restored in a way in the last government with a very proactive foreign policy, and which was executed by our chairman, party head, Bilawal, when he was the foreign minister. And then, of course, the bilateral with China. And I feel that these bilaterals are important as well. Other than that, I think that, you know, perhaps the tone was set in the last government. It's similar somehow. We are not taking ministries, but I think that that restoration of ties, the taking out of populism, from our foreign policy, that all happened, and it has to move forward. I also take a minute to talk about Palestine. I think and during the caretaker government, we were relatively quiet on that front, and I think that Pakistan has to really articulate again, or emphasize on ceasefire there, and also on the two-state solution that has to be articulated strongly to start with, and of course stability in Afghanistan, stability along the borders, and so on.
Thank you very much for that. So move on now to Mr. Omar Ayub Khan. Your PTI has taken some strongly critical views of the West, especially the U.S., and of course these are important trade partners for Pakistan. It has blamed at times the U.S. government for the ouster of Imran Khan, but it is now calling on the U.S. to take stronger stands against alleged election rigging and stronger stands in favor of democracy. So. What are your recommendations to the new government on how Pakistan should conduct its relations with the US and the West more broadly?
Very pertinent question, Mr. Kugelman. We don't have any umbrage or any animosity towards the government as a whole, but certain aspects or actions of the US government, especially in the Cypher issue, which we pointed out. The United States people and the United States has always been Pakistan's largest trading partner. And we look at economic interests. Number one, there has been always good trade between the two countries, and we want that trade to flourish. A lot of our students are studying in the United States and the West, and we want that to we encourage that. And many of our people are doing great work in the United States, research, etc. Similarly, in the European Union, as well as in Australia and other countries of the world. Having said that, what we want to emphasize is, and people have to realize, that direct foreign investment can only come into Pakistan when there is rule of law. Any investor worth their salt are going to see what is the rule of law. Is their return on investment going to be secure? Are the rules there? And unfortunately, at this point in time, the answer to that question is that it is not. The reason being because the arbitrary decisions being handed out, the way the government is handling investors, the manner in which the courts have been forced or pushed to take actions, the world is watching. It's a very small world today. So therefore, the foreign investors are very, very skittish to invest in Pakistan. And similarly, the domestic investors in Pakistan, I'll just quote a figure. The private sector credit has contracted by 86% in the last 12 months. That's a massive decline. The interest rates have been jacked up to 25%. So the effective lending rate to companies is almost 30%. So investment is down, unemployment is up, manufacturing is down, inflation is up. We are on the verge of hyperinflation. So all these aspects don't bode well. To top it off, unfortunately, the lack of rule of law is creating an environment where the domestic investor is not investing, foreign direct investors are not looking at Pakistan. The stock market has got a very narrow base. The stock market, it's a pump and dump operation. Unfortunately, the people who are invested in the stock market, they jack up the prices, and all of a sudden, then there's a drop in prices, and they liquidate their positions. There are no new IPOs in the market worth the name in the last, say, 18 months or so. So these indicators are not good for the economy. On top of that is the energy crisis. The Mia Shahbaz Sharif, in his speech, he talked of energy theft. Now, he didn't talk about the capacity payments. The capacity payments are based on take-or-pay contracts that you have to pay to the energy companies, and they are going to be close to 2.2 trillion rupees this year. And he was talking about theft, which is it's like defining the elephant with just a single hair of its tail. So you are ignoring you're not even acknowledging the tail of the elephant. You're just acknowledging a single hair of the tail of an elephant. The elephant in the room is the capacity payments of the energy sector, and in particular, the power sector. So those have to be addressed. And the current government does not have the wherewithal, does not have the imagination, does not have the guts or the will to basically execute those reforms that can only be done with a strong government with a vision. During our time, we had started what is called the CTBCM, the competitive trading bilateral markets, in which there would be many buyers and sellers of energy wheeling. That has not been pushed forward by the PDM government or this government, unfortunately.
So thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is that you think that Pakistan should be engaging with the West, particularly on commercial issues, but that Pakistan needs to get its house in order, so to speak, on the economic front first. And actually, I think that's a good segue for the next round of this discussion, which is going to focus on the economy. So, Bakir, I'll turn things back over to you.
Yes, I think Michael, the segment has moved on smoothly to the next topic. And we had planned economic challenges. First, we'll go to Mr. Khurram. Mr. Khurram, given that all the political parties have participated in governance over the past 3 years, they undoubtedly are aware of the severe economic crisis facing the country. In light of this shared understanding, is it possible to forge a minimum political consensus aimed at shielding crucial economic decisions from influences of deeply polarized politics?
Well, going by the comments of my worthy colleague from the opposition, apparently because he has used his time to attack the current government, I'm not going to waste your time in replying. But yes, the minimum agenda at the moment, the biggest challenge we face is inflation, which has become really intolerable. And it's something that is a direct consequence of near doubling of our public debt after 2018. So the inflation that we face, in order to cut it, we have to give radical indications to the market and to the world that this government is serious. So one of the first things that needs to be done is, of course, number one, to cut non-development expenditure of not only just the federal government, but the provincial governments also. Second is to demonstrate if a serious privatization transaction that we can conclude and go ahead with it, so that we are willing to cut down public sector losses. Third, of course, to begin, and which a work that was begun back in 2022, is to seriously work on an energy transition. It's something that we need to move very quickly on, and the foundation is laid that in the next decade or so, all our energy projects will not be based upon imported fuels. They will be constructed using domestic fuels and domestically available fuels. So in order to reduce our not only foreign exchange exposure, but also to improve the environment, we also need to bring certain changes into the structure of our economy, particularly our transport sector, and start moving away seriously from fossil fuel-based transport to electronic vehicles. But mainly the question is how to cut inflation. Unless the government of Pakistan begins to demonstrate its ability to repay its debts, the capacity payments are an issue, but currently the largest single item in the government's budget is the domestic debt repayment, which has nearly increased 500% since 2018. And it's essentially squeezing the federal government's ability to provide any kind of relief to the people or to provide certain social services that are absolutely necessary to combat poverty. So that squeezing of the federal government's budget, which is, of course, enhanced by the woes of the power sector, is something that needs to be addressed completely and can only be done first by administrative measures, by privatization, and, of course, then instituting a rapid energy transition.
Coming to you, Dr. Shah, the incoming government will have to enter a new agreement with the IMF as soon as possible, leading to the inevitable introduction of new taxes in the upcoming budget, which would increase the financial strain on common people. Is Pakistan People's Party prepared to endorse the IMF program unconditionally and accept its share of political repercussions?
Definitely not, I think. And that was perhaps one of the reasons why we didn't want to sit in the government, because we could feel the heat during the elections, the inflation or the inflationary shock that the people of Pakistan went through in the last 1.5 years. And that was primarily also related to the IMF program, or the stabilization, as they call it, of the economy, in which, you know, particularly the utility bills went up, they were skyrocketing. We don't want to, you know, and if it goes to that level where the people are hurt, People's Party would like to at least have its say in the parliament. But going forward, I think that one of the reasons why we are in a mess that we are is because perhaps the processes of our economic policy are really broken or faulty. We're not using the parliament enough. Somebody who's sitting in the parliament, I feel that probably there's this level of arrogance, especially within our finance ministries, who know who have this know-all. They begin with this, you know, knowing the solutions. For instance, the fixed exchange rate issue, which has also really done its damage to our economy. I think that the government needs to really have a first of all a whole of the nation approach. The entire Pakistan has to be in it together. They have to give leadership. Political stability is a must for us to break free of the IMF eventually. We have to have political stability, strong leadership. The fractured decision making, where the provinces are going in one direction and the federation is going in another direction, that has to be done away with. We have to have provinces and the federation, the federal government working together and taking certain strong, so if there has to be austerity, for instance, if we have to cut down on the government expenditure, if we have to live within our means, if we have to face the energy challenge, if we have to do debt management, I think we have to have the whole of country approach and really give strong leadership and perhaps come up with a very strong vision. I mean, it cannot be business as usual of like just following, you know, raising your energy, raising tariffs and then putting all the pressure of stabilization on the common man. That is very, very painful. I hope that there are new and creative ways to manage debt, to move forward, to go into productive economy, you know, to tax the rich and so on. But it has to be really done in a different way. I think it cannot, if it's done in the same way as we know it, it will be from one IMF program to another.
Mr. Umar, as the opposition, and we heard that your party is nominating you as the opposition leader, what recommendations would you offer to the government to navigate the economic crisis? While your party supports engagement with the IMF, it has raised concerns about the current government's legitimacy to enact necessary reforms. Considering the dire economic situation that we have in the country, do you believe we can afford to delay addressing the economic crisis until the question of legitimacy is resolved?
Number one is the underpinning is the legitimacy of the government itself. That has to be laid, number one. Number two is the way they are approaching the economy. The PDM government and now the caretakers and this government, now let's see what they do. But the PDM government and the caretakers, they approach the economy and the current account deficit in a way, it's just, I'll just give you an example. An analogy, it's like as though you go to a doctor and you say, doctor, I'm breathing fast. And the doctor, instead of, you know, giving you medication to reduce your breathing rate, the doctor just throttles you and holds your windpipe and says, now, you know, the patient is breathing better because the breathing rate has gone down. Of course, the patient won't breathe because you throttled the patient. That's what the PDM government and the caretakers did. They restricted imports. machinery imports. They restricted the outflow of capital, of equity transfers, etc. And they claim that they've addressed the current account, one of the twin deficits, and that's the current account deficit in this way. And the budget deficit has continued to balloon, and they just can't fix that. So it's going to be a very tough challenge for them. Number two is the rule of law, the privatization process that Mr. Khurram Dastagir just mentioned. The basic underpinning of any privatization is, again, rule of law. When an investor, when he or she invests in a country or in any project, they want their investment safe. They want that there should be free repatriation of capital, free movement, etc. That is not there. If we take the Supreme Court of Pakistan, there are 56,000 cases today pending in the Supreme Court of Pakistan. What to talk of other lower courts? So in this environment, I think you will find very few takers to come and invest. And the returns that if you do require for a privatization, to make the privatization process successful, will be very high. And the depth and the width in the domestic market is not enough to leverage those investments. The banks are not willing to lend money because the local investor or the banks, local lenders will be lending at 29 to 30% plus interest rate. And when you are paying 30% interest rate, you can't have any, you would have to have a rate of return of approximately 46% to basically make any sense of the investment, because 30% would be taken up by the interest payments alone, and the other 16% would have to go around and be sustainable for your return of investment. So it's not a good situation for the country's business to be in, and they don't have a game plan. And the energy switch that they're talking about, it was the PMLN government that chose to go for the 4,000 megawatts of fossil fuel projects that we are stuck with today, for which we have to import $800 million of fuel, LNG, every month, which is hemorrhaging out. And it was our government that we said that we will have 70% of the fuels are going to be, of the energy is going to be green energy. That means hydel plus renewable energy. And we brought down the tariff structure from 16 cents before 2018 during the PMLN government to 2.5 cents within 1 year. So the will has to be there. The methodologies that you have to implement should be there. And most of all, the rule of law, whether it's in the political framework or the business framework, the basic requirement for the country is strong rule of law. Once you have rule of law, the country will be able to prosper.
Yes, Mr. Omar, I agree with you that rule of law is the basic requisite. And even if we have to have better security in the country, we must ensure rule of law. And now Michael would ask you questions about this security situation and how the incoming political leadership plans to tackle that. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Bakir. And I know that earlier there had been a bit of discussion about the terrorism issue and cross-border terrorism. I just wanted to drill down on that a bit more. So go back to you, Mr. Khurram. Pakistan has indeed been experiencing tensions with most of its neighbors in recent months, especially Afghanistan and Iran, as I think you had mentioned. Cross-border terrorism is one of the main reasons why. So my question is, how should this new government address the terrorism threat, and specifically this TTP threat emanating from Afghanistan? And separately, if you could just say a few quick words about another neighbor, that of India. How do you think Prime Minister Sharif will approach India? Will there be a push for more trade or for better relations more broadly? Or do you think Pakistan would condition any of that on changes in India's Kashmir policy?
Mr. Khurram.
We'll take Kashmir first, because there is now a, you could say, paradigm shift in Kashmir on August 5th, 2019, when the previously disputed territory was practically digested by India as its own constitutional territory and no longer disputed. They just took it over, they split it in three. So it's something that is totally unacceptable to Pakistan. And unless there is some movement on that front, improving Pakistan-India relations will be very, very difficult. But that said, the trade option is always there, but India has to reciprocate, because all we hear from India is warmongering. We hear very strong and violent language from Mr. Modi regarding Pakistan. So if he's not willing to come down from his cross-border terrorism hobby horse, then we are stuck. And another Indian election approaches this year, and it's unlikely that in the run-up to the election, there can be any improvement in relationship. So let's see once the Indian election is through, if any progress can be made and if India softens its stance. The trade option, as I said, is always there. Even in very limited quantities, it can help both countries. But the security issue is just too large, cannot be ignored. As regarding Afghanistan, I think I've already said that we have very real interests in Afghanistan and its stability. But there too, the question of sovereignty arises. And so the first thing that we can do is to finally walk the talk and practically ensure that Pakistan's territory is not used to launch attacks on any other country. It's as simple as that. Because then, of course, we demand the same sovereignty from our neighbors, from both Afghanistan and Iran. So we need to improve our policing of the borders, our monitoring of extremism gathering anywhere, and then, of course, make a serious, open-minded effort with our neighbors. The current status of the Afghanistan government, of course, makes it difficult. They have not been recognized by any notable and workable bloc of the world regarding financial issues, other issues that arise. But here, everywhere, regarding our neighbors, Pakistan has to, first of all, assert its sovereignty and then demand that its neighbors also then act upon it. Trade sounds very good, and it's, of course, a win-win solution to many international crises. But in this very, Afghanistan is not a normal country. Iran, the post-revolutionary Iran, is not truly a normal country. One is heavily sanctioned, the other is in an international law limbo. And then we have these two powers, one superpower, China, and one rising power, India. So the work is cut out for Mr. Sharif to begin building those bridges. Of course, China, we now have a much deeper relationship than we had even 10 or 15 years ago. But how will it play out in the current international environment of the West's, well, preoccupation with the Ukraine war? And one thing that Pakistan is yet to reckon with is the retreat of the United States from the world. And it's something that can bring new opportunities, but at the moment looks more problematic.
Thanks for that. Some more interesting food for debate. One could convene a very interesting separate discussion on that. So thank you. Let's go to Dr. Nafeesa now. So PPP has been tragically impacted by terrorism and violent extremism, as of course a number of political parties have in Pakistan. But of course, in the case of PPP, the assassination of Benazir Bhutto looms large in this case. How do you think the new government should address the resurgent threat of TTP terrorism, but also the unfortunate cases of religious extremism that target religious minorities in Pakistan?
Pakistan has had a very clear position with regard to terrorism. And we have often called for strong and very clear confrontation with extremism, whether it's physical and ideological, both. But we also understand that the security situation within Pakistan is also a measure to an extent of our foreign policy, how we articulate our foreign policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan, vis-a-vis Iran, and of course that that directly impacts upon our security situation. And so I think that the three issues which are related to our relations with Afghanistan, the extremism and terrorism, and then of course the trade and Afghan refugees, these are the three important issues that the new government will have to face with. And I think that as I said, we have to also work towards a stable situation in Afghanistan. They're still in a limbo, and while of course we recognize that there are issues of terrorism, there are human rights violations. As a woman, I feel that it's important that Afghanistan at least gives due respect to women and recognizes them, and they are not they don't become persona non grata. But at the same time, I think we have to look at a situation where the international world also responds along with Pakistan towards the challenges that Afghanistan is or could pose. And it is, of course, posing to Pakistan vis-a-vis terrorism. On India, I think that we'll have to wait till the elections. And as my constituency shares border with India, and when we had trade relations, people of my constituency were directly benefiting from trade relations with India because we grow dates, and we have a very big market for trades for dates in India. So I was directly, people of my constituency were directly impacted, and in an ideal situation, really, I would recommend to the government to find at least a middle way out of. I understand that we have to have, our position on Kashmir is a very principled one. I also understand that India has often been belligerent and often been very rigid with respect to their attacks on Pakistan, on terrorism and so on, which are unfair. We also want equal relations as equal partners with India. All those roadblocks are there. But I think that, I would recommend to the government to find ways to restore dialogue and some semblance of trade, which if we want to do away with inflation in our country, then we have to restore trade ties with all our neighbors, including India.
Thank you very much for that. So now, finally, we'll move to Mr. Omar Ayub Khan. Your party and your party chair have previously expressed strong support for the idea of dialogue or talks with the TTP. So, and my question is, do you think this is still a viable option for Pakistan to pursue, even though previous talks with TTP have previously had limited success? And would you recommend this to the new government from the opposition, or do you suggest other policy options to deal with the TTP threat?
Mr. Gugelman, thank you very much. A very good, pertinent question. Let me start off by saying that when the United States was undergoing a civil war, both the sides, the Confederates and the Union forces, they sat down at the end of the day after the war had concluded, and they basically had to have peace talks. One side won, one side lost. For any country, be it the Irish Troubles in the United Kingdom, they have to sit down. We have, be it Balochistan, be it XYZ, be it the TTP, at the end of the day, we have to sit down with the people within the borders of Pakistan, with the Pakistani people themselves, and we have to ask them, what do you want? What is it that troubles you? And we have to convince them to lay down their arms and convince them that they have to be fruitful members of society. Bottom line, that's one thing. For that, there has to be dialogue. And number two. Number three is, the important question is that we are talking about a situation about trade and about foreign policy, etc. I'm not a diplomat by training. I'm a finance person by training, and we see the world in more of what's possible and what's not in the economic realm. So let's face some realities. At this point in time, Pakistan's economy is in dire straits. We are in an IMF program. The IMF is a lender of last resort. And that means, if I have to give an analogy, that we've been wheeled into an emergency room and having a massive cardiac arrest. We have to, the docs have to apply a defibrillator to get our heart to start pumping. And the country can't be expected to run a 10 kilometers marathon right off the bat. So our sort of time horizon should be that in the next 2 years or 3 years, how do we get for our economy to even start functioning with private sector credit contracting by 86%? That is massive. That means industry is, belly up, it's dead. Number two, when you are talking about the banks are basically lending to the federal government, and they're sitting pretty. They're earning a good return, but that lending isn't going to the private sector. So again, that's a very major point of concern. The other important point, number three, is that last year, our gross domestic product, GDP, did not increase. The pie didn't increase. The pie actually shrunk by negative 0.4%. That means there has been whole-scale devastation of the economy. So these are the realities we are looking at. And to stabilize our relationship with the rest of the world, when we are talking about trade, we have to see what we offer. We in the textile sector are at the bottom to the, I would say, mid-low range of the value-added sectors of the textile industry. Similarly, in the in the light engineering sector, so we have to get our game up and to encourage industry to invest, to increase exports. But exports just don't happen overnight. It takes time. It requires, again, I come back. I'm harping about rule of law, because rule of law encourages foreign direct investment. It encourages local investment. It encourages research and development. It encourages investment in human capital. Today, the youth of Pakistan is disillusioned and it's going out of the country. So you have to reverse that flow. So these are serious issues we should be considering. And just looking at foreign policy, it's good to talk about, but then let's be realistic. Foreign policy depends upon the economic policy. Economics is the bedrock that drives foreign policy. Economics is what gives a country the muscle to negotiate policy in its favor. If you are weak economically, you are not going to have much leverage with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Really interesting. I think at this point, we're going to bring the session to an end. Let me just say that here in Washington, I would argue that the main hope for Pakistan right now is that it is able to achieve some more stability across the board, starting with economic stabilization, but also more political stability, and of course, more stability on the security front. And I would say there's very strong support here within official Washington for Pakistan to follow an economic reforms agenda with the hopes that that would bring more sustained stability and therefore allow the country to move forward on many other fronts. And indeed, the goal of the Biden administration is to reframe its relationship with Pakistan so that it's anchored around trade and investment cooperation, though certainly there's an acknowledgement here that with the economic situation, what it is in Pakistan, there could be some limitations for doing that in the immediate term. And my sense is that one of the big challenges of getting to more stabilization across the board is the strong political polarization at play. And this is, of course, not unique to Pakistan. We're living through an era of deep political polarization seemingly everywhere. In that vein, I think that this conversation that we've had today was encouraging in the sense that this is my perception, my interpretation. I heard some shared views, some convergent views. I emphasize the term some convergent views among the different party leaders we've assembled here, more so on external issues than on internal issues, which is not surprising. But still, I think that's very telling and encouraging. So with that, I want to thank Bakir and IPI for this collaboration on this discussion. And also want to thank the panelists. All of you are very busy people. So thank you for taking the time for this important conversation. Bakir, I don't know if you have any final words, but again,
So thank
thanks
you very
to
much.
all.
I just want to thank everybody for